Hi, this is Kevin, and welcome to part two of the tutorial for the coding assignment for static files and class-based, generic class-based views. And this part one is going to have to do with static files. And why are we adding static files to our Django project? Well, we want styling. Okay, so up until now, we've been willing to just, kind of accept the default browser style for HTML, and it hasn't been very appealing visually. The other thing is that we have been willing to put up with the fact that with just plain old HTML, we weren't going to get a responsive page. So it wasn't going to respond to smaller display sizes like those for tablets and smartphones and all that kind of stuff. So those are the functionalities that we're adding. And here are the things that we need to do. Okay. I've given you some starter files to get you moving along. Okay. But before we bring the starter files in, let's just take a look at um, our settings. Okay. So our settings here. The first setting that's important for us to get right is um, we have to have in our list of apps. Let me make this a little bigger. We need to have in our list of apps Django contrib static files. That's the code that makes the Django static files architecture go. That was included in our base settings file when we got started. Okay, but it's important that it be there. Okay, now down at the bottom, we've had in our settings files static URL, and it says slash static slash. And that really has to do with where where to find static files. Okay, now let's add our static files and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we have those entries. We probably had all of these in our default settings file, and we'll come back to settings in a minute. So, okay, where are the static files going to go? Well, each app is going to have its own directory for static files, just like it has its own directory for templates. Okay, so we're just going to go up to course info, right click and say we want a new directory, and we're going to call that static. Okay, and then within that we want a new subdirectory, and we're going to call that new directory, we're going to call that course info. And this directory structure really mimics the structure that we have under templates. And the reason why we have it the way we have it is that these files are going to be eventually aggregated. So all the static files from all the apps are going to be aggregated, and this allows them to have a namespace and organization by application. Okay, so what are our static files? Well, I'm going to take the ones from the starter files. It's it's all the files in the starter files except for base.html. So it's logo, normalize, skeleton, and style. Okay. So I'm going to copy those from my starter files, and I'm going to paste them right in the directory where I want my static files. And I'm just going to say OK. And if we expand that directory, you can see we've got logo, normalize, skeleton, and style. Okay, and what are these all part of? Well, these are all part of something. The logo is the logo created by Pinkham for his Django Unleashed book, and we're borrowing that. But normalize and skeleton are CSS that we borrowed from the Pinkham book as well. And style.css was borrowed from the Pinkham book, but I changed it a little bit here and there. Okay, but for the most part, we're borrowing the styling and the responsiveness from the Pinkham book. Okay, so we have all those right there. Alrighty. Now, are we okay for static files? Well, let's see. We'll do a little testing and it'll come back here. Okay, now let's think about templates. Okay, we have a template right now called base.html. Let's take a look at it. Okay, and it has kind of the shell for our page. Okay, and it looks pretty good, right? It doesn't have all the styling hooks that we want. It doesn't have, if you look up in the head, let's make this type a little bit bigger. If you look up in head, you can see we have a title, we've got a couple of meta tags, we just have a little bit of JavaScript, but not much. Okay, and what we don't have is we don't have JavaScript for things like responsive layout. Okay, and we also don't have we haven't hooked up the CSS. Okay, so we haven't hooked up hardly anything at all. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to add some lines in right here. Okay, and then the other thing that we got here is that we don't have some of the class equals attributes on things like the header in order to get at the styling that we want. The way that we get the logo is by saying class equal logo. So we haven't added a couple of important attributes to the content. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, and the footer is just the footer that we've been using so far. All right, so let's override that. Let's take the base.html that I've given you in your starter files, and let's copy that in so we won't have to do all the. Okay, let's click on course info and paste, and we say OK, and we're going to overwrite. Okay, so now we've overwritten this, and let's go in to base HTML, and let's look at some of the changes that we've gotten. Okay, first of all, very important, up here it says load static files at the very top of the template. Okay, that's what makes the static files available to our page. If we don't do that, we're not going to get them. All right, so that's an important addition that we have to the page. Next, we have all these style sheets that we just copied in, and now we're going to connect to them. All right. So, and how do we connect to them? Well, it is interesting that when you're using static files, the way that you build the URL for these things is you get the URL where the static files are kept by using a template tag and then saying static, and then the directory to these. And I can see already that I have a typo. See where I have course info, and this should be course info. So let's get that fixed. Okay. So you're going to have that typo too. Well, hopefully I'll go back and fix the typo before you get to it. So confirm that you didn't have a typo on the normalize one. Okay, so again, like this load static files, we needed that to make the static files work the way that we want to. Now on each of these style sheets, we need to build the href using a template tag, and one important part of it is static. Okay, so we've got those. All right. Now, what else have we done? Well, we've actually come down into the header, okay, and we have added a class equals logo annotation to connect this H1 with the style that's in which of the style sheets? It's in the one called style.css. And that provides a background image that's how our logo gets on our page. And I'm not going to claim it's a great logo or it's perfectly placed, but we borrowed it fair and square from Pinkham, and that's how he placed it. And maybe it's not perfectly placed for us, but for our purposes, it's going to do just fine. Okay, so that's where it gets placed in style.css. Okay, so that's a little bit different. We have our same links at this point. Okay. Let's see what we've got. I don't think this content block has really changed. Okay. Oh yes, we do. We have, for instance, where we say something like here div class equal 12 columns, and up here we say section class equals desktop 4 columns, and then up there we say section class equals 8 columns. That's all more styling hooks than we had before. Okay. And then the footer has some additional content in it because I had given a Creative Commons share alike license, but the fact is that now we're borrowing stuff from Pinkham, and it's not really ours to give away. So we've got some stuff here from Pinkham, some stuff here from the people who created the skeleton, and then the normalize. The skeleton is a bare bones responsive framework, and normalize is a CSS coding aid, right? So I figured I'd give them their due. Okay, so right here, just with these changes, we should have solved most of our styling and layout related problems. So let's do this. Let's go back and start up our server. Okay, and run the server. Okay, it said it was already in use. Well, that's fine. And let's bring down our browser. And we've got a couple of things. One is we've got style, and the other is we've got layout. So what do we seem to have? Well, in terms of style, we have a lot more interesting style. The typography is a little more compelling, right? The the use of color type is I think better than we got before with the default. We have our navigation links in a proper navigation bar. Okay. Now we've got the footer, which has some additional content in it down here. And it's on one hand, it has a lot of style. On the other hand, it's been kind of de-emphasized, right? And again, we had the link to Legend and to Creative Commons, but now we have a link to the textbook, Django Unleashed. We have a link to Skeleton, which is a dead simple responsive boilerplate. Okay. And we have a link to Normalize the CSS, which is a modern HTML5 ready alternative to CSS resets. And these are all things that we borrowed from the Pinkham book. Okay, so if you want to know how they work, feel free to look in the Pinkham book. Okay, so let's do a little testing. When I did the testing here, I found that I had a problem or two with my HTML from before, and I'm just going to the extent that you've copied my code, you might easily have the same problems. So what's really interesting is that we haven't changed any of the subtemplates. Right now, we've only changed the base template, and yet we're getting all of this layout and styling. It's very powerful. Okay, so let's go to instructors. Okay, do we have a paginated page? Yep, that looks good. Probably what I would do when I look at this, I look at this, I go, well, maybe putting 25 on a page was high. So, might I dial it back to 20 or 18? Yeah, I might. I'm not going to change it now. Okay, this is close enough for me. So I want to be able to create a new instructor. Okay. Joe Blow. Okay. So I create the instructor. Yeah, that worked fine. I have a link for the edit and the delete. So let's click on the edit. How does that look? Yeah, that looks good. So call him Joe Blow-ish. Update. Well, that's working. Let's delete it. He's deleted. Can we cancel it? We can cancel it. Can we really delete it? Yeah, let's really delete it. Okay. And again, the layout's not perfect here, where the cancel and the delete button are a little too close to each other. Yeah, I think they are. Do I know how to fix that? No, not particularly, because I borrowed all the layout and the styling from the Pinkham book, kind of en masse. And I'm not that interested in either the layout or the style to take the time to go fix it. But in some other life where I've got more time, I'll figure it out. Okay. All right. So everything seems to work well for instructors. Let's go to sections. Okay. So create a new section. Section name 888. Semester. Let's make it the current one, 2018 fall. The course. Let's make it XML for libraries. The instructor, let's make that somebody who we know. Somehow we're not going to back out. Um, uh, oh, Bill Qualls. QRST. Bill Qualls. My old buddy Bill Qualls. Okay, so we've got Bill Qualls. Create the section. Right there. It's good. Okay, this is when I realized that I had a mistake in the HTML for my section detail page. So I'm just going to go fix that. So I'm going to open up section detail. And it turns out that I don't have a beginning LI tag here. And I'm going to come back. And I'm going to refresh it. Well, I didn't want that. I wasn't expecting all my styling to go away. Now, was I? No, I wasn't. So, I was in sections. All right, let me discover what I broke here. I'll be right back. Okay, well, I restarted my server. I killed the development server because I wasn't able to get it to stop using the controls that I had. And so on the Mac, the way I kill the development server is I come and find it. It looks like this. It's an instance of Python 3.6, and I go up and I stop that process. Okay. I'm not sure I know how to do it on Windows, but I know that it can be done. Okay, so I did that and I changed it again. So now I want to do the delete. You'll see I've got the proper HTML here for that. And if I click on delete section, I get the option, do I want to delete? If I cancel it, I come back, delete. Let's delete the section. Everything worked fine. Okay, so somehow the section detail page had had a missing tag in the HTML. Okay, so let's test courses. So here's the course list. Let's create a new course. Let's call it Infost 101. Okay, and let's call it basket weaving. I've already put this one in. Digital basket weaving. I've had a couple of versions in this browser. Digital basket weaving. Create the course. Okay, and here we are. Okay, the delete looks good. It's in a proper LI, so we can try to delete it, cancel it, try to delete it, delete the course. Okay, so that seems to be working. So that wasn't broken. Let's go to semester. All right, so let's pick a semester that we're not working with yet. And look, I've got a problem with that code as well. Okay, So let's do this. Let's go find semester detail and fix that. And again, you might not have this a problem if you didn't copy my code. Okay. And I might not have this problem had I properly tested. But that's life. Okay, that's changed. And let's come back over here. And let's hope we can refresh this and get what we want. Yep. Now we have a proper delete semester LI. And did we try to edit yet? It looks like we can edit it. Okay, and then delete it. I'm not going to delete it. I'm going to cancel it. Guess I want to leave my semesters here. Okay, that looks good. Let's go to students, see if they're broken. So let's just go, see if we can find one of our, well, let's create a new student so we know it's not one of the generated test ones. Mary Molinowski. Probably not all that well spelled. Nickname Mare. Okay. And it looks like we broke the delete here too. I think we cloned the page and somehow propagated that error. That's a shame. Okay, so let's go find student detail and fix that. So student detail, and again, we're missing the opening LI tag for some reason. How exactly and when I broke this, I don't know. And then let's bring our browser back. One of the really nice things about the Django development server is that it will find your changed files. So there it is. Delete student. Mary Molinowski, we can cancel that. We can delete that. And let's really delete her. That's great. And that just leaves us with registrations. So let's create a new one. Let's put see if we can find somebody. We know the Steglianos are real people. The Steglianos are family friends. So Franny Stegliano, let's put her in, she's in a lot of classes, but let's try to put her in this 691 and see if she's already there. Create registration. Well, that worked. All right, that's good. And the delete link on this one is broken too. Okay, so let's go fix that. So that's a student. No, that's not. That's registration detail. So registration detail is broken as well. And let's just go unbreak it. All right. Very good. So let's refresh that page and it's fixed. So can we delete the registration? Yeah, let's delete it. And it's gone. All right. So what have we done? Well, by changing the base.html page and by properly adding and situating these static files, okay, which are now in static within the course info, they're in static course info. By doing all that, we hooked up the styling and the responsiveness, okay? That's all it really took. So that's pretty good. So are we done with static files? Yes and no. Okay. Um, it turns out that um, for the development server, okay, the development server serves our static files for us, and it's very good about finding them. Okay. Um, it's not typical in production when you deploy. It's not, first of all, we're not going to be running the development server. Okay, we're going to be running a very popular production server called Gunicorn, like unicorn with a G. It stands for green unicorn. Okay, and Gunicorn doesn't automatically serve up these static files using the Django uh, development server capabilities. Well, how do we usually serve static files? Well, what we normally do is we don't serve them with our Django server at all. What we typically do is we typically have an HTTP server like Apache or Nginx, okay, that is the HTTP server, and we typically have it forward all of the all of the requests that come in to the URLs that we're intending to process. We have it forward it to the Gunicorn production Django server, but we have the HTTP server, which again is going to be something like Apache or Nginx. We have it do the serving of the static files. Why? Well, because it's really good at static file serving, and we want to take the traffic away. We want to take the computing burden away from the Django server, because serving static files is a kind of a waste of time for the Django server. Okay, being able to get the development server to serve our static files is a convenience for the developer, but in production, we don't want to do it that way. So when we're configuring our production deployment, okay, we're going to have to tell um, we're going to have to tell the HTTP server when we configure it where to serve our static files from. And that means that we're going to want to collect them into one spot. Okay? And I just want to show you that there is a command called collect static. So let's stop our server. Okay? This is a command of manage.py. Okay? And so here's what we say. We say we want you to collect static, which means go through all the apps, including the apps that we created, like Course Info, but the ones that we adopted, like admin, and collect up all the static files and put them in one spot. Okay? So what happens here? We go to do that, and it says, do we really want to do it? Let's say yes, and it breaks. And it says why? Well, it says you're using the Static Files app without having set the static root setting to a file system path. So what's static root? Let's go to settings and see if we have something there. I've already got settings open. Let me open it. Okay. Well, yeah, we set static URL. That was fine for the development server to be able to find and serve our static files while we're doing development. But we haven't told the production server, uh, uh, we haven't, I'm sorry, not the production server. We haven't told manage.py where to put these things so that the HTTP server that we're using will be able to find them. Okay, so when we tell it to collect up all the static files, it says, well, I don't know where. So I'm going to go back to my already baked version of settings and copy the entry for static root that I use. Okay, now I just want to point out that what we have here is we're saying that the static files would be collected in our project. Okay, this is the base directory for our project in a sub directory called static. Okay. Do I have to put it in my project? No, I could put it in a whole other place on the server. And when we deploy, we'll be dealing with that. But in the short run, let's put it into a place where we can find it. Okay. Okay. Oh, and something else that I want to point out here is let's go up and look at git ignore. Where's git ignore? Look at git ignore. Git ignore says ignore anything that's been collected into static. And why is that? Well, if in fact we practice this collecting up the static files on our development machine, we don't uh, we don't commit the aggregation of them, the collection of them, to the repository. Why is that? Well, we would have two copies of all of our static files. Okay, so what we do is, um, even if we do this aggregation here, we don't put it into the repository. When we deploy to the production server, we don't get any collected up static files. We have to run manage.py on the production server and run collect static on the production server. Okay, so we're not going to be putting them into the repository. And let's just look, let's just make sure that we can see that we don't have that directory already. Okay, so if we look out in the overall project, there's no static subdirectory under the project as a whole. Okay, but if we go to settings, that's where it says to collect them to. All right, let's just say we want to collect static again. Okay, and what happened? Well, it collected them right under static. So it's not too surprising that we get the static files for course info. Okay, but also we got the static files for admin. Pretty neat, right? All right. Now, do we need to keep this? No, we don't really need to keep this. This is just wasting space for right now. Sorry. So I'm just going to take this collected static files and I'm going to say delete them. Okay? Because again, that's not where the development server finds our static files. That's that whole collecting them and putting them in a spot where we can point the HTTP server to. That is something that we do on the production server as we deploy. All right, but since it relates to static files, I wanted to make sure that we covered it here. So leave the entry in your settings file for static root. If we're going to put them in a different place on our deployed production server, we'll come back and change this. But at least we have some entry for that in settings right now. Okay, well, that's it for the static files. And I'm going to see you in part 3. I'm sorry. This was part 1. I'm going to see you in part 2. Bye now.